All right, welcome back. This is WUB, Wake Up Belize Morning Vibes. It's a Friday morning, as we call it, Big Up Friday here. We'll open up the phone lines as we try to make the connection with our first guest. As you know, we've been utilizing Skype more frequently since this COVID situation. And so we've gotten used to bringing in a number of our guests through Skype. So we're hooking up our first guest, and as soon as we bring him on. But in the meantime, we open the phone lines. The number here, 280-4299, 280-4299, and you're welcome to join us. It's 12 minutes now after 7 o'clock. As I said, we do have two other guests besides our first guest, which is a total of three. We expect to be joined by Dominique this morning. I don't know if David will also be with us, but they're certainly welcome to join us. The number, as I said here, is 280-4299. And you're welcome to join us and to get involved. Interesting developments over at Nietzsche to hear that those top managers have in fact been terminated over a disagreement. It sounds more like an internal conversation that got out of hand. We have had a very close relationship with those persons, especially Ms. Vernon and Ms. Zaiden, who normally are interacting with the media. Karen is here at least 3, if not 4 times a year. Everything from the street festival to the jazz festival to any other major event. She's also been an excellent partner with Creme TV whenever we are in need of facilities or whatever. She's in a position to assist. Karen Vernon has been an extremely good partner with us over many, many, many years. And so it's really disheartening to hear that she was the victim of this dismissal, which according to their part of the story happened in a most disingenuous way. Certainly there should have been more dialogue with persons, especially people at the top. Managers, bosses, people in charge tend to be insensitive and dismissive, particularly when they have backative, if they feel like nothing can happen because they've got the backative of people in charge. If they're not careful, they tend to express a certain level of arrogance, which is really unnecessary many times. If, you know, people don't know you're the boss, so sometimes it's best to be humble and you know, keep your bossness and bosshood under control. Humble yourself and dialogue with your people. I understand that the concern was about money and having the finance necessary to keep Nietzsche afloat. But you know, and I don't know the internals of it, but what I'm concerned about is the abruptness of being dismissed and fired because you have a disagreement. Couldn't there have been a little bit more conversation on the matter? And even if it ended up with those 4 persons still being laid off, maybe it could have been an arrangement as opposed to what it's coming across as, which is being fired. And it's not a good image for the manager there, the top manager, Ms. Badwan, nor is it it doesn't look good for niche. And as you know, as they brought up in their press release, that there were some audit issues, some concern about misappropriation of funds. The Minister of Culture, Mr. Faber, had to weigh in and gave strong support for Ms. Budrani, and so it sort of just faded away. But it's important, you know, when there is smoke in an area, that we may be concerned that fire there. If there is some smoke coming from there, it's more likely that there's a fire. How large is the fire, how out of control is the fire is another thing. But it seems that the niche should not be in the news as being draconian in their approach, and either the boss and you take it as I give it to you. It ought not to be that. It ought to be some kind of level of, you know, it's culture. It's presumably the place where people can dialogue and people don't have to be on edge and don't have to have these almost corporate kind of you do as I say or you're gone type of approach. It should be culture. It should have a little bit more elasticity to the conversation and a little bit more give and take. So it is unfortunate, and we wanted to express that. We've had a good relation, as I said, with Ms. Vernon over the years. We find her always being an overhand, willing to give, willing to help, certainly in our relation and interaction with her. The same with Ms. Zaiden, but we only see her maybe once a year because of the film festival coming up once a year. But with Ms. Vernon, as I said, it's usually 4, if not 5 times. In fact, one time she was even here around the issue of cycling. So she has been here as our guest on a number of occasions. All right, that's one area. The issue of, as we brought up yesterday with the Chamber of Commerce, and let me give the number again, 280-4299, 280-4299 if you want to weigh in. Yeah, we saw the report from the Hotel Association and the fact that they polled a number of the larger hotels to find out their thinking about opening up, specifically the PGIA. As you know, a week or so before, the other tourist umbrella, which is the Belize Tourist Association, BTIA, they did a poll, and that poll had a number of questions, yellow flags that came up as a result of it. Some people asking who were polled, how many were polled, and I think the reason why there was so much question around that was because it ended up saying that as a result of the polling, they had a kind of a split in opinions, and as a result, BTIA would not take any position on whether the airport should be open, but would rather leave it up to the government to decide what's the best way forward. I don't think that a number of persons within the industry was satisfied with that, and as a result, the Belize Hotel Association decided to conduct their own polling, which was not a resounding open up the airport, but certainly it was more people saying that they think that the airport should be open, and that certain protocols should be in place and be maintained to ensure that there's a screen or a sieve to make sure that we don't get infected persons coming in. We know that the last 3, in fact 4 persons that were positive or persons that came from outside. We have seen among ourselves over the last few months that there are no other expressed infected persons coming out of our population. There's the concern about, well, some people might be walking around asymptomatic and have it but don't know that they have it. But it's been over a couple of months that we have not seen any infection coming out of our general population, and that those who have been infected have been persons coming either from the outside through the tourists or person that came in through the plane from Houston, and the others who have come in from across the border illegally. And we saw a very dangerous situation where a person, Belizean, had 2 Guatemalans and they were on the road already inside Belize, and it wasn't until they were stopped at Unitedville that we were able to discover, and I say we collectively as the system were able to detect that those persons were infected, and they were taken back across the border. So it's a very, still a very fluid situation for us. We are, like the rest of the Caribbean, showing very low numbers, very few deaths. In our case, it's only 2. In certain other areas of the Caribbean, it's 0. I believe in Grenada, it's 0. So we in this region have seen low incidences of the COVID-19 from among our population. Obviously, we are following the dictates coming from authorities, and by practicing these measures, we've been able to a large extent to keep it down. An indication of this is that we are seeing more and more of a relaxation of the protocols that were put in place. And I'm even hearing that people are saying that at the end of June, that we may be out of the state of emergency altogether. So we are moving progressively, while we are noticing in other states, other jurisdictions, other countries, that the numbers continue to climb, and that in fact the pandemic has not gone away. There has not been an accepted cross-the-board vaccine of any kind. There are a number of treatments that are being experimented with, and some are showing positive result while others are still questionable. But there is no announcement of the magic bullet that somehow the cure or the vaccine has been found, though there are efforts being made to do that. But what is really affecting the world is not so much the disease of COVID-19, but rather the fallout, which is an economic fallout. And that is because it was a total closed down, shut down, trade stop, tourism stop. People had problems in operating even within states, and so the economy of the world basically started to implode. China, who was the first area of seeing the pandemic and seeing a reduction at that time, because they are now seeing a rise again in infection, but they had an opportunity to start their economic rebound. And yeah, he's there? All right. So we'll get off of this now. Better I take this. He's very, very late, so we're going to be unfortunately cut into his time with us this morning. We have Mr. Mario Lara from California. Mario has been with us on a number of occasions, as you know, and so let's get right into it. Mario, welcome.
Good morning, Nuri, and good morning to your listeners.
Yes, man. We're sorry that you chopped into so much of your time. We wanted you from 7 o'clock, but it's now 7:25, so we have just a limited time to talk to you this morning. But
Okay.
welcome. We appreciate your being here. Give us an update. I understand that you've moved from where you were and you are now in Sacramento.
That's correct, Nuri. About 9 months ago, I accepted a promotional position with the city of Sacramento. So that's where I moved from Southern California to Northern California. I'm the director of the Youth Parks and Community Enrichment Department with the city of Sacramento, the capital city of the state of California. It was a great opportunity for me, and I haven't been as engaged as previously. Obviously, I'm going through a transition period, getting to know a new community here in Northern California,
Yeah.
and going through a lot of, this global pandemic is affecting every operation across the globe, and definitely here in Sacramento, where we've had some high rates of infections. We were under a stay-at-home order for the past several months since March. And so, yeah, so we've been dealing with the situation just as everyone else has been dealing with it across the globe.
I see some figures about California. The people want to get back out. They want to get on to the beaches. You're now going into your summer months, and people feel chafed by being locked in. How are the people dealing with that struggle?
It is a struggle, and there is frustration with not being able to do things in a normal fashion. There's always a handful of people who will express that in negative ways. The majority of people are complying, just like in Belize. I think the majority of people are complying here in California and in Sacramento region where I'm at. The enforcement has been different in posture. Here, the enforcement has been more light touch as compared to Belize, I would say. But the compliance rate is about the same. As it drags on, though, that frustration builds, and there is a need for, we all talk about the mental health issues, the need for people to be outdoors, the need for people to socialize. We're human beings, and the pressure is building on the economy as well. So similar dynamics as you see happening in Belize. There's the pressure building there, the worry about, how long can the economy sustain this lockdown posture. I know the conversations in Belize that's going on is about when do we open up the airports. Here in my field, there's a lot of pressure to allow sports and sports fields to be accessible, open up the community centers, get back to more business activities. So yeah, there is an underlying frustration there, but for the most part, I think there's understanding among the community, and then we're learning as we go. We're learning more and more about the pandemic itself and how we can mitigate the risk. There was the question about whether masks were effective or not effective. And so now the guidance is that you should be wearing a mask whenever you're likely to be amongst people or encounter people, social distancing, keep 6 feet away. So I think people are adapting to it, but yes, there is that underlying frustration.
Yeah. I know that there's a large percentage, some people say the highest percentage of Belizeans in the United States is concentrated in Southern California. What's the population of Belizeans like in Northern California? You're way up there in Sacramento. Is there a presence of Belizeans in Sacramento?
It is very interesting, Yuri. I don't have definitive statistics on that, but wherever I go, and I've been all over the place. I was in Germany for a while, then I was in Southern California. Now here I am in Northern California, and just anecdotally, when I bought a home in Southern California, on the street where I bought a home, there were 2 Belizean families on the street where I lived, and I got to know them within a few months of buying a home in Southern California. I've moved now here to Northern California, and less than a mile away, I bumped into a Belizean family, and now we're friends. You know, so Belizeans are everywhere.
That's
You know,
good.
I don't know the exact numbers of the population here in Sacramento, but when I say I'm from Belize, invariably somebody tells me, "Oh, I know, I worked with somebody who was from Belize, or I knew somebody who was from Belize." So we're out there
Oh yeah.
in large numbers,
Oh yeah.
Nuri, but I think we're a quiet bunch.
Yes, yes. I could remember maybe 40 or more years ago, you said Belize, people were mixing it up with Brazil, and you usually had to go back and say, well, British Honduras. Yeah. Oh, yes, yes, yeah, I remember British Honduras, you know. But now, when you say Belize,
They know.
they know where Belize is, you know, even
You know, and
though
a lot of them have been there.
they know it's in the Caribbean. They may not know the specifics, but they've heard the name, and there's a level of goodwill when it comes to hearing about Belize. Because of our limitation of time, Mario, you've been very vocal on certain issues. A couple of them I'd like to be able to touch today. The Nigel Petillo land movement, if I could coin that term to describe the effort of trying to redistribute land to those Belizeans who have never had access to land.
Right. So I don't know if I've been very vocal, but I try to amplify issues that I think are important and need to have an airing. I use my Facebook profile pretty much to comment on situations in Belize that I find important and interesting to talk about. And Nigel's movement, if you will, the land movement, I think is a scream, is a cry for help, and it's an indicator of a problem in Belize of inequality, income inequality, and I think that issue needs to be aired out. And I hope with general elections coming up that conversation will take place and people will pay attention to the growing income inequality in Belize, the poverty rates that are high, and the fact that people don't have access to lands. Now, Nigel's actions, if you will, very controversial for some people. If you're a landowner in Belize and somebody is squatting on your land to bring attention to that issue, you might take umbrage to that, and understand why the private landowner took a different position. And I actually engaged with that private landowner on my Facebook page. He reached out after I made a post, after I listened to his call-in on your program. I think it was with Mose, that he called in to defend his position and to put forth his point of view. But you know, I am sympathetic to the concern that Mr. Nigel is trying to draw attention to. So I made a comment on Facebook page. But on the same token, I can listen to, and I want to understand the point of view of you know, the landowner. It is a problem, and I think Mr. Nigel is rightfully calling attention to it, and it should get attention from our political leaders, and they need to sit down and figure out a way to improve land distribution and land management in Belize. It has been a problem. You don't need a scientific study or a deep. Everybody who has tried to engage with the lands department, the prime minister himself has described the lands department as a hotbed of corruption. So we know that there are problems, and that we know that, but the problem is we haven't had deep discussions, and we haven't had the political will to implement good solutions to those problems. And that's why you have the movement of Nigel that has to occur, because people are getting frustrated and fed up that they're not able to make headway, even when the problem has been talked about and talked about and talked about ad nauseum.
Indeed, and I think that the conversation has not gone away. There have been a number of noted persons that have weighed in on it, but it's still not really a central focus. I think we'll know how important it is when we see the upcoming elections, and whether or not it forms a plank in the discussion, or whether it's backburnered and it's just an issue there. Yes, JC. All right. We also wanted to weigh in on the issue that you've talked about quite frequently in the governance process in Belize. You've noted that the United Democratic Party is again now coming forward with plans for its convention next month, perhaps a month from now, because I believe they said the 12th of July. Please weigh in on your concerns, which you had expressed. We are now understanding that it may be a very large field. We are hearing Honorable Sedi Elrington, Honorable Patrick Farber, Honorable John Saldiva. We're also hearing Mr. Bradley, Darrell Bradley, who's presently the President of the Senate. And I think one more is Omar Figueroa, all members of really the House of Representatives and the Senate. So you're thinking about that in terms of leadership, and if you wish to also discuss leadership for the PUP.
So my concern is leadership matters, and you have to have leaders with integrity, leaders with vision, with a clear vision, so that they can rally the support of people and the community to implement programs, policies that that will lead towards human development, progress, and growth. But there are some fundamental issues with governance in Belize that any leader, whether it's PUP or UDP or any of the third political parties, any government, any political party that ultimately is victorious and becomes the government in Belize, the majority party that leads the government, we will have a tremendous challenge. Not just the economic challenges brought on by COVID and those kinds of things, but some fundamental issues of governance that we haven't addressed over the past decades and 40 years since independence.
For example, what are some of those issues you think needs to be brought?
So if you look at a good example is the World Justice Project has an index of rule of law. A basic thing, where does Belize rank in comparison with other countries in terms of its rule of law and adherence to rule of law? Very low in the region. I think 24 out of 30 within the region, and quite low from a scale of 0 to 1. Belize ranks at 0.48, below the halfway mark in terms of rule of law. And there are many subcategories under that index that can tell you, access to justice is very expensive. Corruption within the legislative body and within the executive body is very high. There are just there's lacks of checks and balances, and there's just some basic fundamental things with governance, our governance system, that will make it very difficult and challenging for any leader that heads the government to dig us out of this mess that we're in, for lack of a better word. And then you have the issue of the tremendous debt. Belize is $2+ billion in debt. The revenues have dried up. The public service payroll is extremely high, and so that will be a tremendous challenge. And the problem, what the high debt burden does is it devalues the wealth of the nation. So now we are seeking to attract foreign investors, but those foreign investors will want a high premium, will want to earn a high rate of return for the risk of dealing with a country that is so high in debt. So then there you will have a transfer of ownership of the wealth from the nation to those investors, and that will compound the problem of inequality. So I think any leader that's looking at that situation will have to make some very, very tough decisions as to how fast, how quickly can Belize develop economically. I am hoping that we find leaders that are willing to take a slower pace and focus more on human development, and have a gradual, and it will, to me, a slower and gradual recovery will mean that we can hold on to our national wealth and our national assets, um, mo- we're, we're more likely to be able to do that.
All right, in our last question, I'll go back to the situation in the United States. We know that today is celebrated in some states, I believe Texas. I don't know if other states in the United States celebrates
California does.
Juneteenth. Oh, so Juneteenth is celebrated in California also. Um, could you, in your final comment to us this morning, put what has been happening in the United States over the last 3 weeks in the context of Juneteenth? We've seen where emancipation, which means that you're free, you're no longer enslaved. One has to wonder what has happened over this last 150 years when we see the blatant disregard for human life displayed by that officer that had his neck, had his knee on the neck of
Right.
George Floyd for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Talk to us in your last comment about the situation in the celebration of that historic day post seeing that officer with his knee on the neck of George Floyd.
So the tragic murder of George Floyd seems to have been the proverbial straw that has broken the camel's back, because the protests, the sustained protests across the nation, and really it has gone global, it has really, shocked the system to the core, and it's a conversation that is long overdue. And it seems to me at this point that people don't want to walk away from it without getting some concrete changes in the system. So there have been protests happening in my area as well, and I have been out a couple of times. I have witnessed it firsthand, and you feel just the tensions in the crowds, and mixed with feelings of frustration, anger, hope that something will change finally within the country. And here we are, Juneteenth, celebrating it's 100 and something years after emancipation, and we're still dealing and struggling with these issues. I have posted on my Facebook, some things that I have been studying myself about the deep scar of slavery and racism in America. To me, the whole European conquest of the New World is bearing down on the present, and that's why this thing has gone global. It's a conversation that we haven't had. We haven't held Europe to account for colonialism. The world order has been a flow.
It seems like your voice is going down, Mario. I don't know for what reason. Your volume seems to be going down.
Yeah, I know the connection seems a little bit sketchy on my end as well. But no, I'm just saying that it seems to be that finally we're having a moment in history where there needs to be some reconciliation, and some we have to address the weight of colonialism on the present. That's the terms in which I put it in, based on the background and experience that I have growing up in Belize. We have inherited the burdens of the past, and it is our generation and the younger generation really that is calling us to task and saying we must deal with this. And it seems to me, I am hopeful that finally we're at a point now where we are going to make some more meaningful changes to the way that we govern ourselves and the way that we do law enforcement. Right now, that has been the focus here in America, is on law enforcement. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem we have the leadership in the White House that can handle this type of situation extremely well. But we have elections here as well that's around the corner, and I think that will definitely weigh into the equation as to how the elections in November plays out.
All right, thank you very much, Mario. I'm sorry we had an aborted time span this morning, but you're on that long list So we certainly will come back to you. We thank you for being with us this morning and for weighing in on some of your ideas. All the best to you.
Thank you, Neri.